Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. Thanks for coming back and joining me for another week of conversation and me just sharing some thoughts, sharing some insights, and hoping that I am saying something here on this podcast to prick your consciousness, to stimulate new thought, to stimulate new questions, to stimulate new and better behaviors, better habits, and a reduction of those habits, thoughts, and behaviors that don't produce the desired outcomes that's going to help us as individuals, as families, and as a community progress in the way that we need to and that we deserve to. So there's some things that are on my mind that I wanted to share in this podcast, episode 191. But first, before we get into that, I want to encourage you that, it is important to me what I'm doing here with the podcast. It's important to me to share information, to share ideas, even guests, to have folks on the podcast who I think are doing meaningful work, impactful work, and who are doing what they say they're doing and aren't just seeking some kind of self-advancement or self-promotion, but are really in the area of service, whatever that service may be. It could be information sharing. It could be, actually providing some kind of service through healthcare, through education. But I'm really interested in those folks that are making impacts in their communities. And so this podcast is important to me. It's important that what I come to share with you, I've given a great deal of thought about, and I try to organize my thoughts and be precise with my words. And I strive to do that each and every week. And I hope that I'm improving and getting better. You can be the judge of that. But this is important to me. And if this podcast has value to you, and I hope that it does, then I would encourage you to share it with those who you value, your friends, your family, the groups that you work with, the women in your book club, the homegirls that you hang out with, the teenage son who is growing and developing, and you want him to have a balanced outlook on life, and the young lady who's growing and developing, and you want her to have a balanced outlook on life. I hope that this podcast can bring value to you, to your family, and ultimately to our community. So please share this podcast. You can subscribe wherever you're listening right now. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Castbox, Amazon Music, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Spotify, anywhere that you can access podcasts. That's where you should find the Nora Speaks podcast. And it's definitely a privilege and a pleasure as I continue to share with you that I do this. And I strive to bring you a quality product. And if there's any suggestions or comments that you have, I'm always open to them, even your criticisms. You can share those at nora@noraspeaks.com. That's nora@noraspeaks.com. Now, I want to have a conversation about Black women and the importance of Black women and how Black women matter, but not necessarily in the way that we think, or not in the way that mainstream media and news promotes the promotion of Black women. And one of the things that really has brought this topic to mind is when I'm listening to them, to those on the news and on the news magazine shows, and the experts who come on and they talk about, right now the hot topic is the abortion debate, and the Supreme Court pulling back the constitutional protection of Roe v. Wade. And, and there's arguments on both sides. Some say, well, this should be a decision that the states make. Some say that this should be a constitutional protection. I'm not here to argue or debate either side. What I'm here to kind of expose is how Black women are being used again. And the conversation that I'm hearing, and if you're paying attention and are plugged in, then you're hearing this too, where they say that because in many states where abortion is now outlawed, that this is going to have the greatest negative impact on Black and brown communities, where Black women are, there are economic disparities, whereas if a woman who was in, let's say, Dallas, Texas, wanted to get an abortion, and because abortion is outlawed in that state, then the closest state perhaps is California, where a woman can get an abortion legally. So they say, well, this is going to impact Black and brown women because of the economic disparities, whereas a Caucasian woman, more likely than a Black woman, will have a job where she can have paid sick time, where she can have vacation time, where she can take off from work and have the ability to travel to get that service that she wants in another state, whether that may involve travel, accommodations, and then, of course, the cost of care. And so because Black women have a lower or smaller economic footprint, have decreased economic opportunities, they're saying that this is unfair because it's going to negatively impact Black women. And it reminds me of the conversation that was held when COVID-19 first hit us back in 2020. And they were talking about how, they have to find a creative vaccine quickly because of the health disparities that Black people face, Black communities face, because there are so many more Black people than Caucasian people that have comorbidities, meaning conditions, health conditions that can promote disease, like high blood pressure, obesity, what else? Kidney disease, right? So we have more health or medical issues and a lack of adequate medical care. So we're a particularly vulnerable population. So let's get this vaccine created and let's get these needles into the arms of the Black community because of the health disparities, because of the increased comorbidities, because of less access to good quality medical care. So as I said then about the argument with the need to get Black people vaccinated, I have the same concern and thought about the reason why abortion should be legal, because it's going to negatively impact Black women, brown women, and the Black community because of the economic disparities. So my argument then and my argument now is, well, then fix the disparities. Whether or not a woman wants to have an abortion, that's a decision between her, the father, her doctor, and whomever she worships. But as it relates to bringing Black women into an argument, again, to, motivate us to get out there and vote for a candidate that's going to support abortion, to get Black women riled up to participate in the democratic process, to bring attention to the fact that because of the economic issues that abortion should continue to be provided and accessible by Black women. I see that we're being used and they're acting as if we matter, but we matter in a very conditional way. We matter when they seem to be trying to push something that's their agenda. And then they say, well, let's bring in Black women and how their communities are filling the negative statistics and falling behind in the positive statistics. So let's bring that issue up. And they continually do this. Like I said, they did it with COVID. Now they're doing it with the abortion debate. And I just say, listen, since now that you seem to recognize that there's an economic issue, now that you seem to realize that there's an issue with healthcare disparities in terms of the treatment that we get, the quality treatment that we get. I mean, how many cases did we read about where Black people were being denied care in an ER and dying in parking lots? I mean, let's put a pause on this. And I'm talking about Black women. Let's put a pause on this and let's really think about what they're saying to us. Do we matter? When do we matter? And what I see within popular culture is that the most prominent and the most influential Black female entertainers who are impacting our culture, these are the women who are producing the content that rivals pornography, either in the lyrics or in the imagery. The most prominent and influential Black female celebrities or their personalities, these are the women whose common language and discourse rejects a union with a Black man. And so, Black women, we have a voice and we matter, but our voice is good when we're being loud about being promiscuous. We're being loud about sex without accountability. We have a voice and we're allowed to express our thoughts, and we're encouraged to do it loudly when what we're proclaiming is that we don't want or need a Black man. So when do we matter? I go back to that. If we're on the microphone and we're talking about the healthcare disparities or we're talking about the economic disenfranchisement, we're barely heard. But when others have an agenda, they bring this up and it's like, oh, I didn't know that you noticed that we were over here suffering. So I know that when we speak up, we're heard if we fit a certain criteria, and that criteria often is sex and promiscuity and some kind of rejection of a Black family or rejection of a Black man or just putting down a Black man. We get the mic and we keep the mic if we're talking about sex and being vulgar and disrespecting the Black man. And we are the only group of women in America that are impacted in this way, where the most prominent and influential entertainers are the ones with this sort of content. We don't see that across the board, and there's a reason why. When we think about the consequences of the things that we are espousing in a very loud and public way, right? For example, the idea that we don't need men. We don't need marriage. And I'm very surprised to see how many young women seem to totally reject the idea of marriage, or they want to recreate it as if it's not the traditional marriage. The vows that my grandmother took, I'm not taking those vows. And so we have gotten the idea that those roles in a marriage and in a family, and particularly for the Black woman, are antiquated. And what we are now experiencing is rearing our children by ourselves, who were left behind by the men that we said we didn't want or need, right? And so now here we are hustling and not really giving our children the nurturing that they require, because now we're hustling to make ends meet while we're still bashing the man that we laid down with, and we're bashing him even though we said, I don't need you and I don't want you. So how do we expect him to be accountable? And you could say, wait, Nora, you're kind of all over the place here. You're talking about the vaccine. You're talking about the abortion debate. You're talking about what Black women say in media and what's happening in our community. And I'm saying this because it's all relative and it's all related. When do we matter? Think about in our modern culture, the women, the Black women who we run to see the most, whether it's on our social media feed, whether it's at a concert, whose books that we're reading. Just think about the prominent women that we see the most and that we hear from the most. And their image, their celebrity personality isn't one that really pushes the ideas of modesty, of integrity, of dignity, of unity, of a family. It's something different. It's something different. And so while there are people who bring up the unfortunate circumstances that Black women in the Black community suffer from, well, these are the conditions that are produced by what we are allowed to promote to our young people through media, which is an incredible vehicle to shift and to shape the minds of people, right? And in our communities, we are watching guns being put into the hands of our sons. Do we matter? How do we matter? Well, when do we matter? And so I say the Black woman absolutely matters. She matters so much that that it is a very skillful and a very clever and a very, very thought out platform that Black women are given. I mean, listen, it's not for me to hate on a Black woman rising above her circumstances. However, I do not like that a Black woman rises above her circumstances by being able to degrade herself, to debase herself, to humiliate herself. That's why can't we have the come up without bringing down the integrity of our people, right? And so the conditions that we are experiencing that they want to exploit to get their political agenda across are the same circumstances that we are allowed to promote in our culture. And it just seems like it doesn't make sense, right? We can't go in two different directions at the same time. And so in a country like America, as advanced as America is, how is it that the Black community, that the Black woman is experiencing such deplorable conditions in predominantly Black communities in as advanced a nation as the United States? It doesn't make sense. And this isn't me being a conspiracy theorist. It's not. But we have to recognize there's got to be some agenda that's going on here. If social scientists recognize that one of the greatest ways and the quickest ways that a family or a generation can leave poverty is through education, why is it in the Black community we have some of the worst educational outcomes, right? How is it that our communities have some of the most unsafe corridors? How is our community flooded with guns and toxic pollutants, and our children have asthma in record numbers, and that the legal economic system in the Black community promotes poverty. How is this possible if we matter so much? So Black women, I want us to be very thoughtful about how they incite our name and how they use us for their own agendas. And I think about the Black woman as potential energy. If you remember from your physics class, that potential energy is stored energy. Potential energy is energy that a object possesses, that's being held by an object in relation to its position to other objects, right? So if you think of a wrecking ball, for example, right? When that thing is pulled back and it's being held on that chain, it has potential energy. Now, Black women, we have so much potential, and our potential is often used for the destruction of the minds of our young people. Either it's through the young mother who had a young mother who had a young mother who just wasn't trained into mothering and into the basic tenets of womanhood. How can that young mother who has not been nurtured herself nurture, right? So sometimes that destructive force that we have is because we are just ignorant, because we simply don't know, because we're just not trained, right? Or we want to make $1. And as unfortunate as it is, we can make $1 by being vulgar. We can make a lot of dollars by being vulgar. This podcast could have so many more subscribers if I was being vulgar, if I was drinking liquor, if I was talking about sex, if I was gossiping. This podcast could have so many more subscribers and followers than it does if I was talking about something else. But I'm talking about accountability in our community and trying to be thought-provoking and trying to send out some positivity so that we can change our outcomes, right? But man, we can make so much money if we're taking off our clothes, if we're talking about sexuality, right? And I mean, these things are cheap and easy, right? The things that are tough are the incremental steps that we take, the habits that we break, the good habits that we gain to trend in the positive direction. Now that's a little bit slower, right? And that's less profitable because that's less desirable. However, if we were kinetic, right? Meaning if we were in motion, right? Kinetic energy is energy that an object possesses because it's in motion. Man, if we were in motion, you could say, well, look, these women are in motion. They're getting published, they're getting promoted. Okay, they are. But how is that benefiting our community? Yeah, you can put some money, some dollars in your pockets, right? But if your energy is destructive to the community, well, you're better off not moving at all, right? And they are talking about all of the unfortunate circumstances of the Black community, right? Well, how is it at the same time that they promote content, not just from Black women, but also from Black men? But that's another conversation, and we can have that too. But they use us as these poor, helpless Black women, and look what you're doing to the Black community. Well, how is it that you're also at the same time bringing guns into our community? How is it at the same time that the urban, quote, urban music station is playing sexualized content that's basically pornography, right? We have television shows and social media feeds where women are talking about their hatred of Black men, right? And Black men are doing the same thing, talking about their hatred of Black women. And Black men are talking about their hatred of Black men, and Black women are talking about their hatred of Black women, right? So if they cared so much, and we know that we control very, very little, then you think that those who do have the power and control can say, wow, you're right. The Black community is suffering with health disparities. Let's create different commercials when they're watching television. Let's put on different commercials, right? Let's not put up so much beer commercials or liquor commercials or Hennessy commercials when Black people are watching television, right? Let's not promote music that has such a high sexualized content, because look at all of these poor single mothers. Because we have all of this thug music, and now our men just want to be thugs. Let's give them something different so that we can change the outcomes in their community. Because when we're talking about abortion, when we're talking about the COVID vaccine, we recognize health and economic disparities. But we know when we're paying attention that this is just a game that they're playing, and we really do not matter to them, but we have to matter to ourselves. And so that is the object of this conversation. Yes, we matter, right? But we have to use our energy. We have to get in motion for the positive things. And otherwise, we're just sitting on all this great potential energy that we have. And I want to have another conversation, and I will at another date, about potential and kinetic energy as it relates to our Black children, as it relates to our Black men, the Black family, and the Black community. There's so much that's just waiting for us to put down our laziness and our lack of accountability and our loose behavior. And, you know, if we tighten some things up, we could have so many better outcomes. But, you know, they're using us. They're using us for their political and social agendas. And I say, you know, what is our political and social agenda? We can't just continue to be pieces or pawns that are being moved, you know, on their chessboards, right? When are we going to think a new thought and take on new behaviors to promote the outcomes that we want? Because what we have just isn't good enough. Listen, they're talking about it when they're talking about the abortion debate, right? They're talking about it when they talk about the vaccine debate. They talk about how we are suffering so much. So why are we continuing to promote behaviors that cause and create more suffering, right? So we can do better. We have to think better first. And I hope that this podcast has created some thought. I hope that this podcast has sparked some questions. And, you know, I'm interested in what you think. And yes, we matter. Black women, we do matter. Just not in the ways that they've been using us to think that we matter. And we have to come together on what really matters to us, and not just continue to be used to promote the agenda of others. What's our agenda? And that's something we could talk about at another time, or I will talk about on this podcast at another time. But, you know, it just rubs me the wrong way, as you could probably hear, when they bring up the circumstances, the unfortunate circumstances that the Black community faces, but they're really not doing anything about it. They're not doing anything about it except help us promote content that contributes to all of those unfortunate outcomes. So it's just something I've been thinking about, and I wanted to share here on the podcast. I'm so grateful to you for listening to this episode, and I'm grateful to all of those who subscribe and follow the podcast and who share the podcast. That really does mean a lot to me. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Until next time, stay in peace. If our forefathers had the power of life to speak from their graves, they would condemn you for wasting your time and life after being freed and not availing yourself of this freedom. They were forced into slavery against their will, but you are now forcing yourself to remain in slavery by trying to force the white man to allow you to remain with him and provide for you as he has always done. Food for thought with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, If you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, noramuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.